The drug was supposed to be cheap by now. Generics should have flooded the market years ago. Instead, prices quietly doubled, patients rationed doses, and executives celebrated another record quarter. Somewhere inside a boardroom, lawyers smiled because the patent clock had just been reset. Before I tell you how they pulled it off, let me ask you something real quick. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you love uncovering scam-level systems hiding behind legal paperwork, subscribe to ScamSphere, because missing the next detail means missing how this story actually works. The public believes drug patents are simple. 20 years of protection, then competition, then prices fall. That is the story told in textbooks, press releases, and polite congressional hearings. But the real system does not work like that. In reality, many blockbuster drugs in the United States never truly lose exclusivity. They shed one patent and quietly grow another. This practice is called evergreening, and it is legal. That is the scariest part. Let us start with numbers. Developing a new drug costs pharmaceutical companies anywhere from $1.30 to $2.6 billion, depending on who is doing the math. That number includes failures, trials, regulatory delays, and marketing. Companies use this figure like a shield. It justifies high prices. It justifies monopolies. It justifies everything that comes next. But here is the catch. Once a drug is approved, the real money begins. A single blockbuster medication can generate $5 to $10 billion per year. Humira, AbbVie's arthritis drug, pulled in over $20 billion annually at its peak. That is not recovery. That is dominance. And dominance is addictive. Patents in the United States last 20 years from the filing date, not approval. That means much of the protection is already gone by the time the drug hits pharmacies. Generics should appear quickly after expiration. Prices should collapse by up to 90%. Patients should win. Instead, companies file dozens, sometimes hundreds, of additional patents. New dosages, new coatings, new delivery devices. Slight chemical tweaks that change nothing meaningful for patients, but everything for lawyers. Humira had over 130 patents protecting it in the United States. Not 130 drugs. One drug. This is not innovation. This is legal choreography. When a generic manufacturer challenges these patents, they are dragged into years of litigation. Even if the generic company is right, the delay alone is worth billions to the brand name company. Settlements are common. Quiet agreements where generics agree to wait. Pay-for-delay deals dressed up as compromise. Patients never see these negotiations. They only see pharmacy receipts. Insulin is a perfect example. Insulin was discovered in 1921. The original inventors sold the patent for $1 because they believed it belonged to humanity. Today, insulin prices in the United States are up to 10 times higher than in other developed countries. Not because insulin changed dramatically, but because delivery devices, formulations, and patent strategies did. The system rewards this behavior. Wall Street expects it. Investors demand it. CEOs are legally obligated to maximize shareholder value. They do not extend patents, someone else will. The scam is not hidden in alleys. It is buried in legal filings. The FDA approves drugs. The USPTO grants patents. Courts settle disputes. Each institution works independently. Together, they create a machine where accountability dissolves. Here is where it gets darker. Patients often assume high prices fund new cures. But many companies spend more on marketing and stock buybacks than research. In some years, major pharmaceutical firms returned over 50% of profits to shareholders while raising prices on existing drugs. This is not conspiracy. This is financial reporting. The thriller aspect is not explosions or gunfire. It is silence. A quiet extension. A quiet approval. A quiet delay. Millions of people paying more, one refill at a time. And the most terrifying detail is this: the system is working exactly as designed. But one drug, one lawsuit, and one internal email would eventually expose how far this could go. The courtroom looked ordinary, almost boring. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Lawyers shuffled papers filled with chemical diagrams and footnotes that stretched for pages. But what was being argued inside that room had nothing to do with science alone. It was about time, about delay, about how long a single drug could remain untouchable while patients paid the price in silence. Generic drug manufacturers had finally started pushing back. For years, they watched blockbuster drugs extend their monopolies far beyond what most Americans believed was possible. Now, they were challenging the patents, one by one, molecule by molecule. Not because they were heroes, but because the money was finally worth the fight. When a generic drug enters the market, prices typically drop by 80 to 90% within the first year. That single fact explains everything. Every additional year of exclusivity can mean billions of dollars for a pharmaceutical company. Delay is not an accident. It is a strategy. The legal battlefield was built decades earlier. The Hatch-Waxman Act of 1984 was designed to balance innovation and competition. It gave brand-name drug companies time to profit while allowing generics a clear path to challenge weak patents. On paper, it was elegant. In practice, it became a chessboard where one side learned to stall indefinitely. Pharmaceutical companies began filing layers of secondary patents. New dosing schedules, slight formulation changes, different salt forms, modified delivery systems. Individually, these patents seemed minor. Collectively, they formed a wall. Challenging one patent was manageable. Challenging 50 was financial suicide. Humira became the most infamous example. Approved in 2002, it was meant to face generic competition years earlier. Instead, AbbVie built a fortress of more than 130 patents around it in the United States. Many covered details so small that patients would never notice a difference. Courts allowed most of them to stand. While Humira biosimilars entered markets overseas, American patients waited. Prices stayed high. AbbVie earned over $20 billion a year from a single drug. By the time competition finally arrived in the United States, the company had already secured its fortune. Insulin told a similar story. Although the molecule itself barely changed over decades, delivery devices did. Pens replaced vials, cartridges replaced pens. Each adjustment came with fresh patent protection. The result was predictable. Insulin prices in the United States rose dramatically while remaining affordable elsewhere. Executives insisted this was innovation. Patients called it survival math. The system rewarded this behavior. Investors expected it. Analysts built it into forecasts. Patent lawyers became some of the most valuable employees in pharmaceutical companies. Not because they cured disease, but because they could stretch exclusivity with surgical precision. Litigation became routine. Generic companies filed challenges. Brand name companies sued automatically. The lawsuits triggered automatic stays that delayed approval. Even weak patents could block competition for years simply by existing. Settlements followed. Quiet agreements where generics agreed to delay market entry in exchange for compensation. Officially, these were compromises. Functionally, they were pay-for-delay arrangements that kept prices high while staying within legal gray zones. The Federal Trade Commission called these deals anti-competitive. Courts argued about definitions. Years passed, money flowed. Patients rarely appeared in these conversations. They existed only as data points, utilization rates, market share, revenue streams. Meanwhile, pharmaceutical companies defended themselves with a familiar argument. Research is expensive. Innovation is risky. Without strong patent protection, cures would dry up. It was a compelling narrative, repeated often enough to feel true. But financial disclosures told a different story. Many large pharmaceutical companies spent more on marketing and stock buybacks than on research and development. In some years, shareholder returns exceeded 50% of profits. The system rewarded financial engineering more than medical breakthroughs. Much of the foundational research behind major drugs came from publicly funded institutions, universities, government grants, taxpayer money. The public paid for discovery, then paid again at the pharmacy. Congress noticed, hearings were held, executives testified, apologies were issued, promises were made. Very little changed. Regulators operated within narrow lanes. The FDA evaluated safety and efficacy, not pricing strategy. The USPTO granted patents based on technical criteria, not social impact. Courts ruled on individual cases, not systems. Responsibility was fragmented perfectly. This fragmentation was the real genius of the system. No single institution felt accountable for the outcome. Everyone followed the rules. The result still felt wrong. Behind closed doors, industry documents revealed the truth. Patent litigation was described as revenue preservation. Delay was calculated down to the month. Every quarter without competition mattered. Patients adjusted their lives accordingly. Some skipped doses. Some split pills. Some chose between medication and rent. None of that appeared in earnings calls. There was dark humor in how precise everything became. Change the coding. Extend the patent. Adjust the injector click sound. Extend the patent. Modify the release timing by minutes. Extend the patent. Innovation reduced to paperwork. Yet cracks began to form. Courts started scrutinizing obvious abuse. The Supreme Court allowed challenges to weak patents. The FTC increased enforcement against pay-for-delay settlements. Public outrage grew louder. States passed transparency laws. Journalists followed money trails. Whistleblowers leaked emails. Slowly, the narrative shifted from admiration to suspicion. The pharmaceutical industry responded carefully. Prices rose more slowly. Language softened. Public relations campaigns emphasized patient assistance programs. The underlying machinery remained intact. This was not a conspiracy hidden in basements. It was a system operating in daylight, legal, normal, profitable, and devastating in its own quiet way. The thriller ending was not an arrest. It was realization. The understanding that some of the most powerful scams do not break laws. They rewrite incentives. And if you think this scam was thrilling, wait until you hear about the next one.